What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Appreciate you guys checking out the podcast. Thank you so much for joining. Make sure that you say hello so that we can greet you, so that a brother can greet you. And yes, I'm referring to my brother, Ask a Brother podcast, Jeff St. James. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks for welcoming me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to say hello to some people who joined. Good evening, from Deborah Hutchinson. And good evening to you, Rhonda Payne. She's saying hello to you, Mr. St. James, and the chat. Anyone else who's in the building, make sure that you most importantly hit the like button on your way in. Rhonda is my pit bull with that. She makes sure that people hit the like button on the way in. I'm going to try to give you a lot more of attention today. So I'm going to ask my moderators to make sure that they moderate the chat and all that kind of good stuff. So I just got finished watching another live where some people were dropping some silly stuff in the chats. So I'm going to ask my moderators to make sure that they watch that. So welcome, St. James, Jeff St. James. Welcome so much to the show. I really, really appreciate it. Been looking forward to this. You are blowing up. How is this newfound success?
I feel normal, but everyone else is acting like it's not. I'm literally just being myself. It just happens to be on camera. And apparently this is new territory for a lot of people. But it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Cool. Just take a moment to the people who may not know who you are, just to take a moment to tell us about yourself.
Oh, okay, sure. I've been working in the field of mental health for over a decade. I'm a licensed professional counselor, certified trauma specialist, and consultant. My job at this point in my career is primarily training therapists to prepare them towards licensure, as well as being able to move towards becoming specialists as it relates to trauma and addressing people with PTSD. And just, working in an urban setting in Philly, my goal is to bring really high quality clinical care to the urban city, which is usually forgotten. A lot of times people kind of see it as something that's in the nice areas, the suburban areas. I want to take what would happen over there, the specialists, the licensed people, and actually have that on the ground level in urban city settings.
Very good. Now, how did you get into that line of work?
I was a combo of things. I think the main thing is while I was in school, still an undergrad, I was wilding out, partying, getting in trouble and everything. And I was getting ready to graduate soon and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And a couple professors back to back within about the same week, they both kind of said something to me along the lines of, if you don't end up with a master's or a doctorate, you probably have functionally wasted your time. And no one had ever told me that for some reason. And it's like a switch went off in my head. Two professors I really respected basically was like, you have a brain where you probably could use it for mental health or theology or this or that, and you're kind of just hanging out having fun. So if you actually applied yourself, Jeff, you actually might actually can do something. So at the school I went to, they had a graduate program for counseling, and I applied for it and got in, and then the rest was history.
Very good. Did you ever think about this when you were a kid? Did you have a knack for talking to people or being a shoulder people can cry on or anything like that?
Not real, like in the sense of like I could talk, obviously, but in terms of like being a better listener, paying more attention to certain communication skills, that was something I learned far more in the program about how much I didn't do that well. And I do think that people who go on to get their doctorates or masters, they probably can do a whole host of different things. They just had a particular interest in a particular direction. And at that point, I still was very interested in politics, very interested in history, very interested in psychology. And I picked the one that was available at the time.
Very good. Forgive me, what were you studying? What was your undergrad in?
Biblical studies. So my bachelor's is in biblical studies and my master's is in counseling.
Okay. All right. Uh, so I'm gonna pick a little fun here. So
Oh, good.
you actually do have you actually do have that, right?
Mhm.
I'm playing because I saw your first podcast where you talked about people going after your credentials and this and that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Just talk about that a little bit. How the you got some newfound success and fame, but there's also a negative side that's going along with that.
Yeah, yeah, man. It's this most surreal thing when you are calm, respectful, but you say things that people don't like. One of their first go-tos is to either call you gay or something along those lines, and then their next line of reasoning is to try to invalidate you and say that your credentials must be fake or that you're not a real therapist. And then as they find out that you are, their next step is to scour the internet to see if they can find you and pull up your license and all your information and see what they can do to kind of find you. So I've peeped and kind of seen that on various threads and people bringing it to my attention that there's some people that's just not a fan of what my message, my style. It's very clear there seems to be a market of not just a market, but a culture where anyone that says anything about women at this point that's not positive, they want to see what they can do to kind of shut you up. And the interesting thing is, my goal for doing this is actually to bring men and women together.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they don't see it that way.
So people were giving you screenshots, or I mean, what were they scouring the web? Explain that a little bit.
They would send me videos of people who had very negative things to say, and then when you go through the comments, you'll quickly see that they like, oh, he went to this school, he this is his license, he's listed on this website, so they're just scouring to see what they could find with it, and that's usually the first sign of they're not looking it up for no reason. They're looking it up to see in what ways they can affect those things.
Mm, mm.
But for me, I functionally was somewhat strategic in doing this to where I had did what I needed to do in the field to be at a place where I'll be okay.
Okay, okay. And you talked about that strategy a little bit on your podcast. Can you talk about it here? Just to, I
Mhm.
mean, I think it was a good setup. So talk about
Mhm.
why you did it.
Mhm.
What was the purpose for setting up a strategy, and then talk about the strategy.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when people jump into these public spaces and platforms, they just are shooting their ideas out there and seeing what happens. Meanwhile, for the last 7, 8 plus years, I've really been watching a lot of dating, manosphere, red pill, black pill. I've been watching so much of this content and just noticing the trend of what happens, particularly with men, every time they speak on these particular issues.
Mm,
And I noticed that if you say something that a certain segment or group of people don't like, that's one of the clear cut things they're going to try to do, try to destabilize you financially. So, in terms of strategies, I decided that I thought it would be better starting off into this space to try to get people who move and act that way to reveal themselves. And first and foremost, trying to get them to reveal how they really feel, how they really act whenever they hear something they don't like and want. It's because so much of the excuses when previous people, predecessors, Kevin Samuels, obviously one of the more famous ones, they always kind of labeled it as it's not the message, it's the tone, it's the delivery. He's so rude. And I was like, so I don't believe it. I believe it's the fact that they're rejecting the message as well. And I decided to be the whipping boy. But the goal was not just because I like pain or suffering, but more so because I want to normalize out loud in front of everybody in a field that's dominated by this mindset, in a field where people who know what's going on and knowing what you can or can't say, being somebody that's in that space and saying, It's pretty rampant in my field, and it's rampant in a lot of other fields. And I'm going to say what the truth is. I knew that they were going to reveal themselves and show just how they really think, feel about people who are independent thinkers, people who believe that men and women do have differences, and that there's unique challenges for both sexes that we actually do need to address in order to come together.
So you mentioned Kevin Samuels. You were a
Mhm.
fan of his, obviously.
Yeah. I would definitely say that a decent portion of the things that he espoused, I agree with. Like anybody, no one's going to agree with me 100%, and I don't think I agree with him 100% either. But
Mhm.
I believe that his approach was an answer to a modern problem. I don't think that he was pushing something that may have would have worked 200 years ago. I think it was something that was adjusting to the climate of where we're at, both men and women. And he was, trying to help his audience to kind of open their eyes up to the reality of what the dating market is like. There's a lot of delusion. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot there's a lot of delusion on one side, and then there's a lot of fear and anxiety on the other side. And before you know it, we're just more divided than ever before. And I felt like he was, in his own way, was trying to attempt to kind of get people to have much more balance and realistic views, not only of the opposite sex but themselves. And I agree with that.
So, I mean, so you told me about what brought you to the space of therapy. What brought you to this space? And you said you were consuming this. Were you
Mhm.
what problems were you seeing a nexus between what you were dealing with therapeutically and what you were
Mhm.
seeing in the dating market? How did you flesh that out for us?
Yeah. The starting point was very, very early in my therapeutic trainings. I was starting to learn and observe some of the things that seem to lean a little bit more feminine in nature, in terms of
Mhm.
confrontation, in terms of unconditional positive regard, just certain strategies and techniques that did very well with women. They wanted it, which explained why so many of them would opt to jump into therapy and want to drag their boyfriends or husbands along with them, because it leans so heavily into kind of how their communication styles tended to function, in terms of how they processed information, in terms of how they would communicate about it. And I would notice this steep decline or a lack of interest in a lot of men, to really, even men that kind of start off with it, they very, very quickly would be like, this isn't it. I don't like it. And I was, you know, at the time I felt it and I sensed it, but I couldn't quite understand exactly what was going on. And then when I started watching the manosphere type information, it all started to make sense. And the holes that I was noticing in the clinical practice, it was starting to make and fill the gaps and voids, where there, in my field in particular, we have what's called evidence-based approaches, and then we have
Mhm.
something called cultural considerations. And this is where you make adaptations to the person or individual population that you're serving. I noticed that they would do all of these culturally sensitive things for the LGBTQ population, for women, for this race or that race, handicapped people. It was all these unique things that was like seen as important, that we had to curate our therapy and our approach to kind of acknowledge each said group. And there wasn't one for men. And it took me a while to be like, wow, like I've been in the field for a minute, and thousands of trainings, tens of thousands of hours, and I don't recall a single thing ever being specific for men. And then when I started to watch the manosphere related stuff, it made sense. And I was like, wow. So there's a whole host of men who felt like therapy wasn't for them. And I started kind of modifying and acknowledging that, oh, well, the bias seems to be more what women tend to want, what women prefer. And if she's the initiator in bringing and starting these therapy sessions with her partner, the clinician is put in a strange position where, if I have to choose between person A that wants the therapy and person B who's kind of, I don't really know if I want this, or flat out, I don't even want therapy, who would they be trying to keep happy? The one who's initiating and wanting to obviously pay for it, versus the one who's not. So again and again and again, it was almost like, well, if I kind of people, I was starting to observe and realize, like, if they try too hard to kind of include and recognize and see the perspective of the person who tends to be the man in terms of his view on things, all of a sudden now she doesn't want to do therapy anymore, or we need a different therapist. So I was recognizing that there was a built-in assumption, not always, but a lot of times, where the initiator assumes that the therapist is going to side with them. And then more often than not, it tended to be women. So I started to notice that pattern. And then I started playing it out with couples therapy. And when I would start to try to lean in a little bit more on what men are needing and his perspective on it, and then hoping that she can reflect it, I was noticing that these women who could have been going to therapy for years, even individually, this was the first time they're having to be asked to validate and acknowledge and see the perspective of the person they're married to. They were
Mhm.
so used to an environment that kind of insulated their viewpoint, that kind of fostered and propped up their wants, their desires, their feelings. And the therapy session was almost like the throne, where she can kind of put at the top of the throne her feelings and emotions to kind of dictate the marriage and relationship. And the therapist will kind of like christen, this is how she feels, this is what she wants, and if we satisfy that, all is well. And it wasn't really as much about what he would need or what he would want. So, I started to peep that and notice that, and I was seeing it rampant, not just with clients that were coming in, it was also with people who were working in the field, where they would make comments and remarks and they never really were realizing that the things that they were saying about men and how broken men were because they weren't acting and seeing things exactly like women. I do know that if I had said the same exact thing, it would be a totally different reaction. So this was a very normalized approach in the culture. It was very matriarchal in nature, feminine in nature, femme-centered in nature. And, it was a lonely experience until I realized that at this point, I think it's time to bring attention and bring light to it.
I wanted to dig into that a little bit more, and you kind of talked about it just now. What was the feedback from other peers when you start bringing this approach? Did they say no, you're wrong, or try to push back against it? You talk about evidence-based approach. Did they say, "Oh, there's no evidence for this," or what was that
Mhm.
kind of feedback?
Um, Very, very minimal support from women.
Mhm.
The ones that tended to be more supportive of it tended to be around my age bracket,
Mhm.
millennials, Gen Z. They're entering into an environment where it seems like men and women are a little bit more at odds than even 20, 30, 40 years ago, where it's in the culture, it's on the internet. It's just this constant conversation about what's wrong with men, what's wrong with women, this gender war thing. So I think it's more on our minds right now as millennials and Gen Z to kind of think about what's going on, what's causing this, and do we only kind of fixate and focus on one group's grievances and not the other? Whereas people that tended to be more that works in the field, men and women who are, let's say, 40 plus, 45 plus, this isn't even on their radar. They have a lens and worldview where they've been working in the field so long that they've never even thought about the idea that there needs to be an approach that's more catered to and welcoming to men and their views and their perspectives. That's not even, they've been trained so long, they wouldn't even know what propaganda or indoctrination is or looks like. It's just what they live out.
How do you think that we got to this particular point? And I've heard you address these education system, K through 12 education. How do you think that we got to this point where, at one time, psychology in particular was very focused on white males
Hmm.
and their psychology, right? That was all the studies and all that. And then next thing you know, we we got the complete opposite. The pendulum has
Hmm.
swung completely to the other side,
Hmm.
where, as you just mentioned, therapy is now a browbeating session for men,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
So
Often, yeah, often it is. I would honestly say, and it's going to sound crazy to say, and eventually I feel like I'm going to cover this far more in detail. I think it was money related, believe it or
Mhm.
not. I think in this, I think there was a understanding that in terms of susceptibility to marketing, to susceptibility of who to market to and who to sell to and who to pander to, I think that they recognized that it was easier to do that with women than it was to do that with men. And
Mhm.
if you can put a legitimate front behind said organization or field, now this is official. Now this is like the recommended thing you do. when you have issues or when there's problems. You go to the therapist. And what I'm kind of bucking against is not all therapists are good. Not all theoretical approaches with the person in front of you is appropriate. So why is it that we're not screening better and acknowledging that there is such a thing, and it could even be dangerous to be sending hundreds and thousands of men into these emotional, mental war zones.
Mm.
And this is kind of how I view it. I think sometimes there's certain fields where we forget that these people are actually people. And if, for instance, you're an extremist, let's say you're an extremist feminist, male or female, you have very extreme views, and you tend to have a heavy bias and tilt towards the feminine or women. You're a therapist, and people are seeing you as supposed to be not biased. You're supposed to be objective. So what you're recommending and what you're saying is supposed to be coming from data, from appropriate inferences, from your training, from your therapeutic background. That's what's supposed to be happening. We forget that some of the people who work in these fields have those ideologies. So now what happens when you take people who have those type of ideologies, and now they're put into classrooms, they're put into therapy sessions, they're put before people in terms of determining medication. They will pathologize masculinity. They will view, if their viewpoint is women and women's views on this are correct and men's views are horrible and needs to be corrected, everything that they're recommending is not to the benefit of the man or even the marriage or the relationship. It's only to the potential benefit of her. And the problem is, if you get individuals who think that way with that mindset, and then you're putting them into places where they're teaching children, where they have people's relationships and marriages in their hands, and they are deciding what people need to put in their bodies, and they have very extreme views that tends to lean towards one gender versus the other versus a balanced view, you can see how this can create a really, really toxic situation where now young boys are being diagnosed and medicated than ever before with ADHD. They're trying to address their impulsivity, all this extra energy. We need to get them to behave at that age more like the girls do. And now you're seeing where it's like on every single level, not only is this not helpful, it may even be potentially causing harm, because now there's a market in an arena where men are supposed to get help where they feel like they can't get the help. So that's how I actually think the combo of telling a certain group that they felt they could market to and could sell to, and keep them on the treadmill of keep coming back, keep paying, and teaching said group that much of what's wrong in their life is always the result of the opposite sex, and encouraging them to leave marriages, and your happiness is what's most important. These are therapists that's using these talking points, which is insane. And nobody is saying it. Well, not nobody. Obviously, there's therapists who think this way, but it's far few and in between. And I'm bringing light on all the therapists, men and women, that know this is wrong, that knows this needs to change, and saying we need a much more balanced view, and our field has effectively been co-opted. And we need to really address this, because this has gotten so bad that men are deleting themselves at insane rates. They're not going to the very people who are trained to help. And the people who are there and trained to help, they are coming from a political and ideological lens where they don't see the significant value in a lot of the men that's sitting before them. It's dangerous. It's wrong. And we need to call it out. And I honestly think, instead of coming for people like me that's trying to bring balance to the situation, we need to reevaluate all the people who have been pushing this type of ideology throughout most of their careers.
You said the people your age are noticing them, are more receptive to your approach.
Yep.
Is it going to take for you all to become the leaders within the industry? I mean, you still have people, college professors and different people who are running programs who are still telling this stuff. How do we change that trajectory?
It sounds crazy, but coming on platforms like this, and people who work in these fields, you have to risk something. You have to risk it. Because if your belief is it's just going to get better one day, it's been worsening. Our families are more broken up than ever before. Marital rates are in a horrible spot. Single parent household rates are up. Nearly every single sector of society is functionally worsening, minus technology, which is getting better. Everything else in terms of our humanity and our connection is getting worse. And we're becoming more divided than ever before. So no, it's not going to get better if all the people who know this is going on can articulate it even better than me are choosing to be silent. So at some point, there needs to be a massive grassroots movement of men and women that recognizes if we're going to strive for actual equality, we have to recognize the true needs and grievances of men and normalize that as a part of treatment, a part of education, and a part of help and care.
Do they realize that there's a problem, though? I mean, they're probably so entrenched in their thinking, their dogma, their doctrine, their education that they got, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, whatever. Do they even realize that this is a problem?
Most of the people who are angry about what's coming out of my mouth and the people who are bringing this attention, they know that there's a problem. It's that they've been taught who's the cause of the problem.
Gotcha.
They haven't been taught that they're a contributing factor to it. They've been taught to be externalizers, that if there is an issue, if there is a problem in society or in your life, it is the fault of somebody else. And in this case, and in this situation, it just so happens to be the patriarchy. It happens to be the man or men in general or masculinity. They've been effectively trained. If there's an issue in my life, this is how, and you want to know how deep it is. Every time you're talking to the people who think this way, all my exes are narcissists now. That's what that means. Right. So you chose them, you got with them, you messed around with them, you may even gave them kids, and you didn't know all this, but you didn't know that they was a narcissist. And you have an amazing ability. Every single person over the last 10, 15 plus years, they all narcissists. What's the odds? That's the conclusion you're going to draw if you've been functionally taught in your churches, in your life groups, in your homegirl settings, amongst the therapists, in the educational areas. If you've been functionally taught, and I definitely will break this down way more once I have time to record my own content about what I'm calling the matrix, the matriarchy of matrix, the matrix matriarchy, where it's functionally like the Marxist matriarchy. And that the Marxist matriarchy is when you take the classical definition of Marxism and separating groups by economically, either you're an oppressor or you're the oppressed. When you take that concept and then you apply it to cultural definitions and norms, somebody always has to be the one who's eventually seen as the bad guy. And someone's always going to be seen as the victim. And the problem with that is that when you take that Marxist mindset and apply it overall to society and attach it to cultural definitions, you get to a point or place where every time a situation involves one party and the other, who's the one who has to be seen as the villain and the oppressor, and who's the one who's seen as the victim and the oppressed? So what happens is you'll find instances where clearly the woman was the aggressor, clearly she's wrong, clearly she lied, clearly she contributed to what's going on. They can't see her as wrong. They'll have a built-in mechanism in their mind, in their way of conceptualizing what happened, to where she's always, so she cheated. Well, what wasn't he doing? She wasn't happy. Huh?
Right.
Like you would never be able to do, because the guy in the scenario is always guilty. So if she does something wrong, DDG, a great example going on with I think her name is Halle Bailey or whatever her name is. She made some very concerning remarks about safety and her life and having her child that would, in normal circles, would potentially resulted in you having your child removed or being given to the father. But because he's the guy in the scenario, well, she was going through postpartum, she had this going on, she had that going on, but you wouldn't do that if the man was the one who was making these type of comments. So what I'm trying to do is normalize not tearing down women per se, as much as normalizing, identifying, and shining light on the far extremist version of feminism that's resulted in and infiltrated all the very areas where we're supposed to learn, where we're supposed to be helped, and we're supposed to be effectively saved from ourselves. This is kind of seeped into so many different things. And again, you'll know the talking points. You'd be like, oh, if you say something, it's clearly he's a misogynist. Oh, if a woman says it, she's a pick me. She clearly has internalized misogyny. They have a built-in catechism of go-to points to kind of insulate and protect themselves from being able to acknowledge that this is no longer a equality movement. This is a woman advocacy movement, but only typically for the worst aspects of what women are allowed to get away with. It does not represent equality in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and so that's been a talking point that they don't want equality; they want supremacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So when you talk about the a woman says whatever, it's postpartum, and then there's an excuse given for that.
Mm-hmm.
Does it seem to you, and this is going to sound like a misogynist statement, but does it sound to you?
Mm-hmm.
I promise you, I'm not. People think that I am, but I'm not. Does it sound to you like there's an infantilizing that's going on with the ladies? The guys are supposed to perform this, but if a woman does it, well, there's an excuse to.
There is, but it's a picking and choosing of when you want to be treated as a princess, when you want to be treated as a queen, when you want to be treated as a child versus when you want to be treated as a peer or adult or even a superior. That's all based off of which is most advantageous in the moment. When it's most beneficial, how do I want to be seen? In the workplace, do I want to be treated as a child or do I want to be treated as equal to the men? When it comes to accountability, do I want to be treated as a child or do I want to be treated as your equal? So it almost depends on the topic, and you'll know and you'll be able to separate the two different types of women. There are women who will be reflective, they'll apologize, they'll acknowledge their fault. And the way you'll learn very quickly which type of woman you're dealing with, all you got to observe is how she responds to things that's happening in pop culture, particularly involving men and women. Who does she tend to side with? Does she tend to lean more to every time it involves a man or woman, regardless of what evidence is there or what little she knows, does she always side with the woman? Does she always side with the men, or is she a little bit more balanced and kind of letting the information and letting the evidence kind of present itself before she kind of makes a good judgment call? If you notice that all the worst women in our society in terms of celebrities, that props up all the worst stereotypical things relating to our culture, if she follows them, if she defends them, if you have situations like Cardi B where she's talking about drugging men and everything, and then she's holding them up as like an icon, that should kind of wake you up, where she shouldn't have to do much more to let you know where she stands on this spectrum between idolizing and centralizing where women stand and hating men. You'll learn that very quickly just by observation.
You talked about some of the delusion that goes on in the mating and dating. Well, let me back up for a second here.
Mm-hmm.
How long you been married now?
In this particular relationship and marriage, 2 years.
2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, and how long did you court your wife or date her or whatever we're calling it now?
About 4 years. 4 years.
4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, did you notice any of the stuff that men are talking about in the manosphere? Did you see this, what we term as delusion, right? You got to be. Did you notice any of that going on when you
in
were
the
dating?
context of our relationship?
No. Did you notice it in any other people, right? So you're dating her for 4 years, but your boys are seeing something. You're doing your therapy sessions. You see stuff online. Did you notice all that when you were dating?
Yeah.
When you were dating.
Yeah, I was very aware of it.
Okay. And how did you deal with that? You just put a ring on her finger and say, I got to get out of this nonsense? Or
I slowly introduced her more and more to red pill content.
Oh, okay.
And to help see where she was in the spectrum of being open-minded to learning and exploring how men suffer, how men see things. And it's not about men's views were always right. It was looking to see if she always operated with women's views are always right, or if she was somebody who is fairly balanced and can kind of say right is right and wrong is wrong, regardless of where the truth lands. And I think that's kind of when you're born in America, you're born in Western countries, that's pretty much what you typically need to try to do with any woman who's gone to higher education or going to college. The moment
Oh,
she's going to college and beyond, especially if she's going to college and she's worked, you have to assume there's a high probability that these are certain built-in things that's allowing her to kind of stick with the sisterhood, even when things are when the woman in said situation is wrong. It could be her homegirl. It could be a famous woman celebrity. If she always has the impulse to kind of stick with the sisterhood, she effectively is letting you know up front that if something happens, she's going to be less likely to apologize. She's going to be less likely to take ownership, and she's going to the people who she's propping up and defending that behavior. She's probably going to show it at some point in her relationship with you when the issues arise. So when you try to tell her something that she needs to address or change, is she likely to sit down and reflect on it and come back and say, I apologize, or I'm going to work on that? Or is she going to keep trying to flip it back on you and somehow it's your fault? These are all the little types of seeds that's kind of been planted when you've been effectively taught the worst villain in the world is men. All that's wrong with your life in terms of problems is men. And if you can't get it right in relationships, it's not because you need to change as a woman or improve or mature. It's because men are trash. Not your mate selection and how you act in these relationships is because men are trash. So in the midst of us dating and getting to know each other, I, would see these types of things, observe it, kind of get her feedback. And I was learning and observing and realizing the woman who I was ending up with and now married to, she was growing and understanding and acknowledging like there's a whole nother perspective of existence that I didn't know. And now that I'm learning about it, she recognized that there's value in us. We will not get better between her and I if she can't ever see my side of perspective. If I can,
no,
if I could only acknowledge hers, our relationship's not going to grow. You may be happy, you may feel fulfilled, but I won't be. So, introducing that stuff very early on and seeing how she reacted and responded to it, it showed me that there was a reason for why I should marry her.
that's as has been said. That's wisdom, proper
Mhm.
vetting. Um, this may be a difficult question to answer.
Yeah.
Has the lack of taking accountability and the inability to analyze oneself, is that something that's new with this environment that we're living in, or in particular, have
Mhm.
ladies just had this ability, or they just lack this ability to do that? I mean,
Mhm.
what are we seeing that we're seeing women who are overweight and their friends are saying, "Okay, you can wear that. You look good in that."
Mhm.
The refusal to apologize, right? We're
Mhm.
seeing really some pathologically bad behavior in this environment, and I'm
Mhm.
wondering, is it the environment that caused it, or were women always like this, or
Mhm.
what are your thoughts about that?
No, it's probably a mix of all the above, right? There because you got to remember that people can change, and
Mhm,
there were women or people who at one point were acting one way, and then 5, 10 years later, they're at a radically different place. And then you also have to factor in and take into account the role of how much social media has exacerbated these issues. I do actually strongly believe that um, social media has convinced the generation that they can delay parenthood, they can delay motherhood, and that they have an endless number of options based off of optionality based off of the likes, comments, and DMs that they get from tens to hundreds of potentially thousands of men, depending on how many apps that they're on and how much they're willing to show. So this is kind of creating an environment where um, the option to leave has never been easier, and the
mhm,
perceived option of what's out there and waiting for me, although false, is rampant. So it's created, unfortunately, an environment where it's like, well, I, uh, I just need a man that's going to accept me as it. Like what? Like 200 years ago, that we would never be talking that way.
mhm,
But now it's like that you won't do it, somebody else will. That's a thing now.
mhm,
And I think social media honestly has had much more of a role to play in that. But does that mean that the average or everyday woman is acting that way? I actually don't think that. What I would say to it though is that our relationship with accountability between men and women might be slightly different. Now, what I'm kind of throwing out in the ethos and kind of putting out in this public space is men seem to generally do a pretty decent job of when they hear something that they're doing wrong, they compartmentalize and separate it from themselves. What you're telling me is I need to work on the action, the thing that I'm doing or not doing well. I need to fix that, not that something is wrong with me. Whereas when you're talking to some women, the ones who tend to be really emotional, really reactive, their first impulse is not connecting what you're talking about to the action of what they did. They tend to connect it to who they are and how they identify. So when you say, babe, this was really an issue for me. And when you crossed the line and you did oh, so now I'm not a good girlfriend. Now I'm not a good partner. Now I'm not a good wife. Now I'm not a good mother. It's a much more personalized initial instant reaction. And if men get better at learning and recognizing this, they can actually help their woman or female counterpart to be able to kind of calm down and not go back and forth with her in that moment, because in that instant, she's not hearing you're saying something's wrong with what she did. She's hearing you say something's wrong with her. You didn't say that, but that's what she heard. That's how she interpreted it. So if that happens, that doesn't mean she get rid of her, cut her off, don't deal with her no more. It means, okay, this is a particular skill that both of us need to get better at being able to handle. You need to be able to hear me, receive it, reflect on it, and not make it about who you are as a person or how I see you as a human being or my partner. But he needs to also recognize that if our black and white talking, the way in which you talk to a man may be radically different than how you talk to a woman, which would be radically different than how you talk to your coworker or boss versus how you talk to a friend. We have to, the emotional intelligence component for men is actually learning how to get better at code switching. A lot of times people kind of demonize code switching, like, oh, I'm not being myself. I'm not. What if that's a sign of intelligence? Where if you want the job, you know how to act on the interview. If you wanted to court this woman, you know you got to say something nice to her to, get her to like you. And if you want to hang out with your homeboys, you're not going to be flirting with him. You're going to say jokes and comments that reflect your relationship. So you code switch all the time. But then when it comes to women, you want to forget that piece that they're not men. So if we do a little bit better job at understanding that we're not doing life with men, then you may adjust with how it is that you're choosing to communicate and talk with each other. So that's my feedback about it. I think accountability, as contentious and disruptive as it may be, I think that we just have different approaches of how to handle it. And rather than trying to force them to just adjust to how we see it, allow for a little grace, give them a little down period, and be patient. And then before you know it, when her emotions aren't as elevated, she can hear you. But he's like, no, we're gonna talk about it now. Like, if she cussing you out and throwing things, I don't think that's the time to finish the conversation, right? Like, so we gotta get smarter. And then this is the flip side. There is a place for women to stop trying to make him conform to being like one of her homegirls. Well, with my homegirls, we can talk about this and we can do this together and this and that. That's why you have your homegirls. Stop trying to make the man you're with an extended version of them just with something in between his legs. He is a man. He has his unique interests, his unique perspectives. And rather than trying to force the other gender to just completely conform, how about you adjust to what tends to naturally be? I'm not saying accept abuse. I'm not saying accept disrespect. What I am saying is that if both sides kind of account for how they normally tend to see men and women tend to be and work around that, we actually can become much better communicators.
Well, I certainly appreciate how you ended that off with both sides need to recognize this. And I appreciate when you talked about, going to therapy, that you tried to get the ladies to see the male point of view, because we're hearing a lot of times where it's the men who have to do the work. The men have to do the emotional labor. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that, but there also should be some reciprocation from the other side for the ladies to say, listen, I need to understand how men think. I need to understand how men process the world. I need to understand how men express their sorrow, their grief, their fears. And it may not be in the same manner that I would address that with my homegirls. And this is the feminization type of thing we talked about. I need to see you cry. I need to see, open up to me. And oftentimes it may not be a safe space. Can you speak to that, where, some of these things that people have told have been weaponized against them.
Yeah. There's very, very, very few men who are now at a place in life, especially when they're older, and they talk about how much they won't share, how much they won't open up. That once I start talking to them, at one time they did, with the wrong person, with the wrong woman in the wrong season, and it came back to bite them. It was posted everywhere. It was shared amongst her girlfriends. It was thrown back in his face during an argument that was completely unrelated. And now, when that relationship doesn't work out, the next woman is going to get a lesser version of his openness, a more closed, guarded version of him. And now she has to try to fight. She's thinking she has to now try to fight harder for that. And now, if she's able to get him to open up, and the exact same thing happens again, now we get to this space where you have people who are in relationships where one side feels as though they can't be their true, authentic selves. And we also have to acknowledge that sometimes what women are asking for and what they're saying that they want isn't lining up to their behaviors and actions.
Mm.
When men start off at the beginning being very open and transparent about their weaknesses, their flaws, their past mistakes, he may never hear from her again.
Mm.
Or she now sees him as just a friend. Or now she can't see him as a leader anymore. And it's cool for them to say, "Oh, that's not me. That's not me." Why is it that every single woman says it's not them? Why is there a built-in assumption that all women are great at handling men's issues and men's needs and men's problems? Many of them struggle with handling their own issues and needs and problems. What makes you think you're going to be able to handle his? So the reality is I'm honest enough to acknowledge not all women are good or healthy enough to be able to hear all of that. And my issue is not that they can't make good girlfriends and good wives. It's just that there needs to be a space where he is able to do that with someone that's trained, that is older, that's a mentor. He needs to be allowed to be able to do that with someone. I'm not of the impression that every single partner, men and women, are going to be great at being able to know how to respond to somebody's past trauma, to respond to somebody's past pain. I don't believe it. And it doesn't matter how many podcasts we do. There's no, I'm never going to believe the majority of the relationships, both the man and the woman, are going to be great at that moment at being able to handle and listen to each other effectively well. Maybe one person's a little further than the other. And this is where you bring in a third party, someone who does this type of work. And they can see where each party is and then help them to grow to a point of where they can do it on their own. And now the one party who felt like, he just needs to listen to me and he's feeling like she never listens to me, they get to a place where they're listening to each other. And, just assuming that the party who doesn't historically like listening to it or is now just going to start doing it. No, like sometimes it requires work and it requires identifying problematic tendencies and attachment issues. And, if you challenge in an artful way, you can get both parties to recognize their inadequacies, their flaws, and things that they need to grow on to be a better partner and, hopefully support the relationship.
What are your thoughts about the manosphere? Good place, bad place? Should men meet in public? I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
It's a mix. It includes a huge grouping of men, which the same thing with like red pill. When people like use these labels, a lot of times the people that's not in it, that's not a part of it, they can just assume the worst. It is true that there are people within the manosphere who genuinely hate and despise women. They exist. Like that. That's a thing, and they have platforms and they have audiences. Then there's men who don't hate women, but they're apathetic towards them. MAGTOW, men that go their own way, men that don't want to, they don't date, but they don't really hate women either, but they don't want to deal with potentially all the potential issues or negative stuff that can come from women or past relationships they've had. So they functionally kind of resonated with being at a space where they can work, they can do life with people. They're just not interested in doing life on the romantic level. And then there's people who are more, what I would say is more pragmatists within the manosphere field. And they will write prescriptions of how they think men need to navigate the new modern space. And within the pragmatists, the realists, these are individuals who have different solutions of how to handle male and female interactions, dating, kids, courtship, the whole nine. There's just different prescriptions of the type of man that they think it makes sense. So you'll have guys who will conceptualize it as basically two types of men. The men that get an above average amount of attention from women, and the men who don't. And your goal is to be the former, not the latter. And that's how they separate it. And they kind of explain to you from working out to bettering yourself to increasing your pool of options by doing this list of criteria. You're now going to have a list of better options than if you don't do it. You're going to be one of the men who most women aren't checking for. That is a general prescription of what's often being recommended. But then there's another group within it, which effectively sees and recognizes that there's certain men who have the capacity to do what they want in the field, and then there's other men that they know will never have the opportunity to. He's not smart enough, he's not charismatic enough, he's not tall enough. Every single box, he's just not it. And they effectively recognize, like, you're going to be a genetic dead end. And like I said, there's the spectrum of where they're seeing all these men can potentially end up. And depending on who you're listening to and being influenced by, some men are being led in directions where their goal is to better themselves, become max out on life, max out on your body, on your mind, on your brain and what you're reading, and take life by the horns. And then there's other guys that's just on the other extreme, where it's like all is lost, the West is done, we're all cooked, and 100 years from now, the human population is going to be 75% what it is currently. Like, that's their outlook. So the manosphere includes all those different types of groups. Yeah.
In mass, how do we fix Black relationships, Black marriages, and also, if you could include in your answer, this level of delusion that we kind of alluded to before? How do we fix all that?
I'll start with the last piece and then work myself backwards. In terms of the delusion, I'll speak for men first. We have to stop rewarding it. Whenever you see delusional, arrogant, obnoxious, or my acronym, which is loner, interactions with, let's say, women in this scenario, and even men, to be honest with you, of loud, obnoxious, narcissistic, entitled, rude, or ratchet individuals, if she is a female, by default, she's going to have some type of intrinsic value to the market. We have to stop being simps, and we have to stop being men that operate through a lens of scarcity with women. We have to prioritize women who don't act that way and start treating them with all the things that we're giving to women just because they look good. So a lot of what's causing this is actually a result of our OnlyFans subscriptions. It's the result of us choosing to pick her out of all the nice, more respectable and feminine women. We'll choose the one that's showing the most. And we're helping create the environment that we're talking about. My issue is you can't take a dump in the dating pool and then talk about how dirty it is. Right? That's what we're doing. And you're getting it from men who are acting like simps on one hand, where they're just giving them access to all this stuff when she doesn't really even like you like that or want you like that. And then you'll have the men who are on the other extreme that are doing so well in life. They've hit the lottery. They're doing well. They're making all the good money. They're getting access to all these women, and then we're racking up these body counts, and then complaining about all the women have high body counts. Like, that's what, and myself included, of being guilty in that. That's actually what we're doing. So this actually starts initially. We're going to say what we're going to do different. You can keep pointing out women's behaviors all you want, but if we keep rewarding it, I promise you, it's not going to improve or change. So, starting from the back end and working ourselves backwards, that's how we actually do it. Is we have to hold ourselves accountable in terms of the discipline financially, the discipline sexually, and the discipline romantically and socially, with who it is we're choosing to do life with in terms of that. This isn't about staying single and being a monk. It's about we have to be much more strategic, intentional, and stop creating the homes, the broken homes, the toxic situations, and creating the environments that we're complaining about later on. So my whole view is not to say that men are ultimately all at fault, because clearly that's not my message. But it is to say that if we want to see things change from men to women, we have to start rewarding all the worst things that we're talking about. Now, on the flip side, with women, if they want to see things improve, if they want to see marriages go up, if they want to see single mother households declining, well, this is going to sound revolutionary to some of you, but if children and sex and historically was connected to marriage, and now you're offering those things without it, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize why a lot of y'all can't get married or stay married. Because the two things that you normally came as a package deal with that in the past are now things you're offering without it. So if y'all, not even saying collectively like 100% of y'all, if 50% of women change the rules for men to get access to sex and kids and children and legacy, what do you think is going to happen to a huge percentage of men? You think they all going to just say, no? No, men, despite the belief that men are so dumb and not emotionally intelligent or have emotional intelligence, men consistently adjust to the market. So in the past, that was why they were doing all the chivalrous stuff. And earlier than that, that's why they were paying for dowries, right? So men were constantly adjusting and trying to reach the milestones of being able to get access to what they will qualify for. Now, you don't need to be a prince. Now you don't need to be a king in order to have body counts that they had. You just need to make six figures or more. You just need to dress pretty well, and you need to be charismatic enough to be able to make it happen. I can mess around with you, and I ain't got to meet your father. You gonna give me kids, and I ain't got to walk you down the aisle. Ladies, I hate to break it to you, but you opened up the game. You opened up and rigged the system where a small pool of men end up getting access to a large pool of women, and you don't reward the men who are reserved, who are quiet, who are just respectful and who are very mindful of not interacting with life. The men who are virgins, you're running the furthest away from.
So those guys are lame and corny. They don't want them.
Well, here you go. So what happens is we, both sides, we have an inverted view of what it is that we're rewarding. You say you want the good guy, but you keep sleeping with the bad guys. You say you want a guy that's faithful, but you keep giving a kid to the guy that got two other baby mamas. So we have an inverted view of what's going on. And it's not that women ruin the game or men ruin the game. We both ruin the game in our own way. So men, we have to stop rewarding the bad behavior that we're seeing in women and actually give those perks of courtship and relationships and trips and bags and rings. We got to actually reserve that for the women who deserve it. And we have to stop contributing to the dating market of sleeping with all these women who now feel that they're being alpha widowed and now are comparing the best guy they've ever slept with all the men that's actually at their level and feeling like they are settling if they get with one of those men. With the ladies, literally what I listed, you can't keep rewarding the worst types of guys in your 20s and in the years where the majority of men are going to want you, and then wait until you've aged out. And now you get to say, well, I guess it's time to settle down. And then you're shocked that the men that you want don't want you. So it's on both of us for different reasons, myself included. I've contributed to it. Haven't been the perfect boyfriend. I wasn't the greatest partner. I wasn't the best man in previous situations. And I have to say that I regret it, because I know that at my best in terms of pursuing women and what I was getting in that outcome, I was the worst in terms of what was resulting in what I was contributing to with the market.
And you were studying biblical studies. You should have known better.
Listen, man. Listen, there was a couple verses I skipped over. I'm gonna tell you that. You know, and like I told you before, man, back then they were close to kicking me out. So I was at a yeah, I was one of those wild dudes where like I knew a lot about theology, I knew a lot about faith, I knew a lot about these things, but I was also in probably my prime in terms of what I was getting access to. So I had these dual realities that I was messing with. Yeah.
Yeah. I got one more question. I'm going to get some questions from the audience.
Sure.
First, I want to say thanks to Death Before Dishonor for the $5. Hashtag Red Pill, Sociology, Societal Norms, Behavior, etc. Appreciate that. I got the banner going across the screen if anybody else wants to help to support the podcast. And I wanted to so if anybody else has a question, I saw a few. I'm going to try to get to them going up. Let me just try to push back a little bit here. Aren't you just pushing patriarchy and old, outdated norms about marriage and walking down the aisle? And I see there's a commenter. I haven't put her on the stage yet, but Zero Tolerance has kind of been saying that. Isn't this just old-fashioned talk? What are your thoughts about that?
Somewhat it is. Somewhat it is. Yeah, a little bit. Not the complete model of patriarchy where women didn't have rights, where they couldn't work or they couldn't vote or they didn't have choice. I'm not pushing any of those things. What I am pushing for is a recognition that there may have been some benefits to certain aspects of the patriarchy and needing to reevaluate if we threw the baby out with the bathwater in the quest to kind of so-called equalize things. The reality is like, I don't think it's bad to say that a woman racking up a very high body count may not actually be helpful or healthy for her. Shocking. Or you being the only deciding factor in who it is that's having access to marrying you and dating you and having a 15, 20-year run of trying that, basing it primarily on your feelings, could have disastrous consequences for the entire generation of women. Like, are the outcomes that you all are trying to protect actually working for you? Or maybe there's a possibility that some of these things that were in place, that were part of tradition, were the ideas that worked in previous civilizations. I'm not saying that we need to do prearranged marriages. What I am saying is I would not mind that you have to have two individuals who are your family or someone that signs off that's a little bit older than you, signing off and saying that they support this relationship. I think we're actually at that point. I really think we genuinely are at that point where the majority of us have been horrible mate selectors. We having children willy-nilly. Some of us are having sex willy-nilly. Other people who are genuinely good people can't get a date. Like, most of us, if you're not batting 100 and you married your high school sweetheart, which is the majority of us, you've had to do this thing by trial and error multiple times. And there's been a lot of heartache, a lot of heartbreak, a lot of trauma. And there's a whole lot of people who aren't better as a result of those things. We are worse off in every category imaginable. And I imagine that, well, if we're functionally, culturally in the Black community, a lot similar to a matriarchy, and in the past you're saying we were a patriarchy, is Jeff advocating for something in the middle? Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Something where women have say, women have value of their voices, but so too does men, and so too does fathers. That's what I'm pushing for, a re-recognition that some tradition may actually matter. And maybe there was a reason for why it was there. What we did in modernity was take out all the things that was supposed to protect children, that was supposed to protect marriage, and said you can have access to all this stuff without that piece. And we've given incentives for people to leave. So now we're at an environment where it's like anybody that speaks out about it, now they're this extremist, misogynist, and they're extremists of the patriarchy and the return. So me saying that some things ain't working out is now me being an extremist. Like we what I'm basically owning is I'm putting out before the public a discussion and speaking on it in such a way where I'm not trying to distract people from the message by using crazy language, calling women bees and all this other stuff. I want to get back to, this is what the issues are. This is what's happening. And maybe some of the things in the past for why they had better outcomes. Maybe some of those things are things we need to reevaluate and potentially implement in modern day. Not all things that are old or in the past are bad, and not everything that's new in the modern era is good. Like can we get back to that part of common sense? So that's where I'm at. People can label it what they want. I get that some people are going to hear what they want to hear, but for those of us who are open and intellectually curious, things are worse than ever before in many respects since Reconstruction. And if we're going to genuinely work towards improving things, there's probably some tweaks that we need to reevaluate that worked in the past, and things that's presently going on, maybe some of us have to acknowledge we need to stop doing.
Very good. I appreciate that answer. And you answered some of the questions that I was going to try to get to already. So I want to try to move on a little bit here. So I want to sum up with something that a detractor is saying in the comment section, zero tolerance. She says males all over the internet are saying being open is emasculine. She's been disagreeing with and blaming men, calling it the complainosphere. You guys aren't trying hard enough. If a guy opens up, the other males will call him weak. That was the conversation we were having before about men being open about different things that have happened to them. What do you say, or is there any talking to the detractors about the need for the manosphere? What male experiences are actually like, in particular when dealing with ladies? What would you say to detractors?
Well, my starting point is my target audience is people who are intellectually curious, not people who have already made their minds up. So if you've already made your minds up that men just are wrong by nature, and that every way in which they're viewing things, you're looking at it through them being wrong, you're not at a season where any seeds of potential truth that I'm planting are going to take root. That's not my target audience. My target audience is men and women that are open to listening from both sides about things that potentially we need to reevaluate. If millions of men are saying things tend to be very unsafe for us in the short and long term when we do this thing, and we're basing it off of a track record of previous experiences, you don't get to tell them their experiences aren't real. And not being a man makes it even worse when you say how men see it. Instead of listening to men, so when we say believe all women, how about believe all men in this situation? How about believe men that all of you aren't the greatest people when it comes to handling and dealing with conflict? That the way in which you talk to your homegirls isn't actually how a lot of y'all talk to your man. That a lot of y'all treat your bosses far better than you treat the man that was willing to die for you. So there are people, men and women, who aren't open to hearing other perspectives and sides. If you're not, then you're not my target audience.
Very good. I'm trying to look through the comments here. Speak to this matriarchy that we have going on. I've often heard that, and I don't know if I grew up in that. I mean, I grew up in the Northeast, and while I was raised by my mother, I mean, I remember having a very strong grandfather. I had very strong uncles. The church that I went to was very patriarchal. So when I would go to my friends' houses and I would see that, big mama, grandma, mama, and all that, it was kind of odd for me. Is there a way to break this? I've heard some people say that it's, the Black community is cooked, as you've alluded to before. And some people don't want to reach back because it's a matriarchy. And is there any breaking it? Are we cooked? Is there any fixing this thing?
If I did not believe that this was fixable, I wouldn't be doing this right now. I'd be focusing on myself and my own life and my own relationship and calling it a day. So the fact that I'm willing to risk some of these things is because I think that there's far more people that's out there than what's being presented on social media that actually wants things to improve. I actually genuinely believe that there are women that don't believe all that's wrong in life is the result of men. I think they're genuinely trying to become better women. better wives, better girlfriends, better human beings. And I actually think that there's men who either made a lot of mistakes in the past or men that genuinely couldn't figure this stuff out that are really like doing some introspection and being like, you know what, man, I can be a better version of myself. The last relationship, I wasn't the best guy. I wasn't the best. I didn't show up in the ways in which I should have. And I need to start legitimately reevaluating if just seeing it through my male lens is sufficient. I think it's sufficient for you to do life on your own. I don't think it's sufficient if you want to do life with another person. So in every other area of our lives, we have no problem listening, receiving feedback. If you want to keep that job, you got a performance evaluation. If you want to get that degree, you're going to take X number of credits. We do this all the time. And then when it comes to relationships, we want to take shortcuts. This is just another area where there is a desired goal, and we need to be humble enough to acknowledge that most of us are walking around with F's and D's. And if we're going to become better versions, we need to put the studying in. We need to put the practice in and the humility in to recognize you can't keep failing this test and calling yourself a genius in this area. You're not. You're not the prize. You're not the this. You're not the that. What you are is effectively a genetic failure where humanity, in order for it to continue, you have to figure out how to do life with women. In order for humanity to continue, you have to figure out how to do life with men. So if you're not contributing to that, you are effectively an emotional and genetic dead end. You're immature and you need to mature. And that includes myself as well. So that's where I'm coming from, where I think it is fixable. Does that mean everybody is going to change? Of course not. This is for people who want there to be a change and want to see their small part to play in making it happen.
I appreciate that. I guess somebody's using a wrench tonight, so I appreciate that. Ike is saying you're cooking tonight.
Hey,
Where's the church in all this? And not that I'm a religious person, but you as a biblical scholar there, where's the church in all this? Where has the church let us down? Is it doing enough? Is it preaching what it needs to preach? I don't know if you saw a viral video about a preacher, a pastor who was talking about 50-50 in the church. I don't know if you saw that one. She said men need to work sun up to sun down, and the woman is just supposed to essentially live a life of luxury, or
leisure.
the man leisure, luxury, whatever, while the man is working from sun up to sundown. Is the church let us down? Is the church now led by a matriarchy?
Yeah, the church let us down. It's become, for the most part, socially irrelevant. And that's why more and more people aren't going. More and more men aren't going. And they see, and particularly men, they see the church as an extension of therapy sessions, where a lot of it is about playing into your emotions and not about actually excelling and winning in life. It's about surviving and not thriving. It's seen as heavily about the constant renewal that needs to take place every week to try to get revved up again for what the week to come, versus like building up on wins and taking life in its adversity by its horns and actually winning and excelling and moving and progressing in life. It's not seen as a thing that's for men. It's seen as a thing for women led by a pastor, which may potentially be a man. And that's it. And it's seen as something where the most feminine version of what we're going to see in a lot of our women is when she's sitting before a man on the pulpit, not with you. That's what's effectively happening, where we're seeing it in workplaces and we're seeing it in churches where she has this side of her. But then when it comes to listening and following directions or taking feedback from me, there's all these issues. And I'm like, well, what's going on? You wear a certain type of clothes. So with the church, you got no problem wearing a certain code of ethics and dressing a certain way and covering up certain things. But when I say it, you're insecure. So is the church insecure? Is the pastor insecure? How come you know how to do that at work and at church, but not with me? It's because for whatever reason, they've elevated those two spheres of influence and social media above the man that they're actually doing life with. So now as men, and so again, as men are seeing it, I keep saying men adjust to the reality of the market that they're experiencing. If
Right.
they keep seeing, if they keep saying that the your respect and your ability to move a certain way and act a certain way, and the best version of you tends to be in these spaces and not with me regularly, then what's the point? So men are opting out of approaching women in the workplace because you're not allowed to do that now. Men aren't going to the church because their perspective is she's going to always have a much higher elevated view of the people in the church and the pastor and the ministers than she is for me. Their view is like, what's the point of it? So unfortunately, no, religion isn't, um, although it can be weaponized and it has been indoctrinated and it has been utilized as a tool to control, it also was something, like I mentioned before about tradition, was something that seemed to protect humanity at going to its worst ends in terms of acting out on our full desires, unadulterated desires. Where religion, despite all of the things you feel like, this is oppressive, this is that, it protected a segment of society that was most vulnerable, women and children, in many respects, especially when done right. It enforced and socialized an expectation of marriage. It enforced and expected a standard of living for you to be able to get a wife. And it expected a standard of what a man had to live up to in order to fit and be in that role. When you remove the religious expectations and you remove the requirements for men to get access to sex and children, all that's effectively left is what um, the secular world has to say, which is live life and do your best, do your thing, have fun, and and there are no real consequences. That's what they're preaching. So
Mm.
unfortunately, the church, is particularly the Protestant church in the West and in many Western countries, is declining. Church membership is declining. Belief in God is declining, and its level of relevance is probably the lowest it may have ever potentially ever been in our nation's history.
Mm. There's a question from the audience here. He wants to know your secret about how you did this, because I've also heard some men who have tried to introduce
Mhm.
red pill manosphere talking points to their ladies, and the women have said, "I ain't going for this. Cut it off. What's wrong with
Mhm.
you?" Left them.
Mhm.
I've seen videos. My marriage was destroyed by Kevin Samuels, etc. So, Pandering a Business says, "I have a
Yeah.
question. How did you slowly introduce your now wife to the men's perspective? Like, did you have a movie night with Kevin Samuels? Just how did you do that?"
Well, number one, it doesn't hurt to be a therapist when you're trying to do this, right? But number two, why don't they share Dr. L's content? Why don't they share Jeff James, Asker Brothers content? The problem with Kevin Samuel's approach was that if and when people were disagreeable, were disrespectful, he matched their energy. And
Mm,
people who are already on the fence, when they start watching that, see, this is why I can't watch this.
mm,
They're completely lost in the messenger and the tone and the delivery than the message. You have to find content creators, speakers, specialists who can speak in such a way where they're not getting off their game with that. They're not doing the whole cussing people out on panels. They're not really going back and forth. They're not calling people bees and all. They're not doing all of that. And that's the first content that you will probably want to introduce people to. Why would you introduce people to individuals who at times will call people and say, "Oh, your back is as big as a linebacker." Like, what? How many women genuinely who's already on the fence is going to receive that well? Maybe her back is big as a linebacker, right? So she's not going to receive that well, right? So instead, Dr. Orion from Psych Hacks is probably, I would argue, top two, top three of explaining things from a psychologist lens in terms of male and female nature, data, statistics, breaking things down using really great analogies and storytelling to really get his message across, where he's doing it in a non-confrontational way. He's never debating, and he's explaining how and why humans end up being what they are, and how relationships function in such a way where people that don't know this information are going to keep screwing it up.
mm.
we have to be better screener. If you're going to do this, you have to be better screeners of the type of information you're going to introduce to her, who it's coming from, and their tone. And if you start there and not wait until you're married to show her this stuff, but try to do it when you're dating, because it'll save you a whole lot of headache versus waiting until you're 5, 8, 20 years in and being like, now's the time to try to get my wife to my guy. Like, I don't know. And then number 2, finding therapists that are more balanced or have a lens or perspective on the a recognition of the value of the need for men's value as equal to women's needs and values as well. Now, that's the harder one to find than the social media stuff, because there are genuinely good men and women who have a very well balanced view of how to help people. It's just that when people go to the therapy session, they just assume the therapist in front of them is objective, is balanced, and a lot of them are not. So if you can do those 2 things, or a mentor or a life coach, whatever, that's the beginning stages of being able to get your other party to be able to understand your worldview a little bit better.
That's an interesting approach. Thank you for that. Rhonda is my pit bull here, who is saying, we got over 70 people watching right now and 39 likes. Y'all hit the like button. We got
Come on,
Jeff
y'all.
St. James in the house. Hit the like button. Yeah, it's definitely some great information that you're giving us. We got to wrap up in a few minutes here. I wanted to ask about what you got coming up. Somebody asked her whether you're writing a book. What's next for Jeff St. James?
I feel like I've been told 10 different things I'm supposed to be working on right now. So I work 40 hours. I have an hour commute each way. I have a 1-year-old. I'm in a new home with getting construction and stuff done as we speak. And I also try to see clients on the side. So I'm, trying to keep up with all, and I got to shoot content according to people. So I'm trying to do a lot of things right now. It is something in the back of my mind. If I do end up writing at some point this year, it's probably going to be on relationships. But it's more so about identifying the different types of men and the different types of women, and how the type of woman or man that people see you as probably impacts the type of man or woman you qualify to do life with. And that you have the ability to grow and become a different type. But if you keep seeing yourself as one thing, and the type of man that corresponds with that you don't want,
We freeze out here.
I am, if you're type A or type B guy, and yeah, I'm good. If you're type A, yeah, can you see me now?
Yeah, I got you now. Yep.
You see me now? You good? Yeah. If you're a type A guy and you're trying to get matched up with a type C girl, I'd envision that she's not going to pick you. She's not going to say yes. So I think that if we better categorize who we are, where we match up in the dating market, and who we can become, I think we'll probably make better decisions with who it is we're pursuing and accepting.
Very good. Very good. I think that's it. I can't see any other really intelligent conversations.
Yeah,
well, not conversations.
Comment section. There's at least 2 people who's just
my man. Yeah, Gary's saying, well, these feminists come. They following you around, man. They following you around.
Yeah,
have you found that where they've been following you around, huh? Yeah.
Well, I'll say this. It's gonna sound very arrogant what I'm about to say, but when your younger life you used to women following you around, this ain't nothing new. So this don't bother me at this point of women who are interested in what's going on with me. That doesn't mean anything to me. I'm at a different mental place. I don't take it personal. I'm at a space and point where my focus and the message just needs to be on the people it's meant for, men and women. It's just not meant for people right now whose hearts and minds are closed and guarded and jaded. Not to mean that it won't mean anything to them later, but I'm not interested in going back and forth in this season of my life. I'm interested in doing my small part, trying to make the change, and those who are willing to receive it will.
Man, I appreciate that. I really do, because I tend to be the type, I'm going to try to convince you. So that's the
Mm-mm,
somebody would tell me that's the Aries in me. So I don't know.
mm-mm. What
But
I
but
learned,
I'm
yeah,
learning. I definitely am learning.
with therapy, with the
Go ahead.
stages of change, you learn very quickly that somebody is in the pre-contemplative stage of change, which means they're not even contemplating thinking changing it yet. It will behoove you to not work harder than the client is willing to work. So what happens is in the therapy session, we're trained to not do more work than our patients. But then in real life, we put far more emotional, intellectual work into trying to get somebody to change than allowing them to be where they are and let things stand until they're ready to do more or be more. I think that if we approach things a little bit different, who knows? So, I'm appreciative and grateful. I think all of you who joined in this live and are going to watch it, I'm very excited about this opportunity. I'm very excited about the chance to just grow as a man and as a potential leader in this space. And those men and women that want to join the journey and welcome me in, to those who's already been on this journey like you have, I'm excited. I It's gonna sound crazy. I think there's more people who think like we do than
Mm,
there are people who don't. I think the people who are the loudest on social media just happens to be the most negative. I don't think that that's a true, accurate representation of where people are. When I see how men and women interact with each other every day, just doing life with each other, black and white, men and women, it rarely ever looks like what it's being presented on social media. So I think that I'm trying to take what I'm seeing in my real life and now dragging and bringing that as an more accurate representation of what needs to be shown on social media.
very good. Thank you for that, brother. I really, really appreciate it. Let me say one more time, hit the like button as we end this. Let me give a couple of shout outs to Death Before Dishonor for the $5.
Hey,
And Jamal also with the $4.99 legendary interview. Dr. L was definitely the guest for tonight. And yes, you should be flattered that these people's are following you around. It means you're doing something right. And
yeah,
I
man.
definitely I definitely like the part about not working harder than your client. I teach a couple of college courses, and I always tell people that too. Like,
Mhm.
I'm not working harder than the student.
Yeah, yeah,
It's their education. So
literally,
I appreciate
literally.
that. Let me add something that I would like for you to do
Mhm.
in
Yep.
your 10 or 11 things that people want you to do.
Okay.
I hope that you can take this on a circuit and really talk to some other therapists and see and,
Mm,
and see the reactions that are going on. I'm sure that there are forums and different presentations to go to. And I really want you to try to do that, because we need a different angle. We have, as you mentioned so often, and as I have mentioned, men are deleting themselves.
yep.
They are bowing out of society.
Mhm.
They are suffering in so many different ways. We got people coming back from the military with post-traumatic stress, police
Mhm.
officers,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
is my wheelhouse, suffering from this. These are all
Mhm.
male dominant spaces.
Yeah.
And then when they encounter people who are uh, uneducated in how to deal with men and bring along feminized educational ideas,
Mhm. Mhm.
it just doesn't hit the same way.
Nope.
So I'm hoping that more people like you, Orion Tierman, as you mentioned, and other people can really say, hey, listen, there's a niche here and we have missed them, and there's a real problem. And
Yeah.
also to any educators out there, I've had a number of teachers on. I really believe that we really have to focus on the, the boys and their
Mhm.
education, their reading, their style of learning, and all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I want to give it to you for any last words, and then we'll break for the night.
Thank you all for welcoming me, and Dr. L as well for welcoming me into this space. I consider it an honor to be able to go from 2 months ago, not nobody knew who I was, to now being able to speak before hundreds or even thousands of people. I don't take it lightly. Um, my goal is not to be seen as this perfect representation. My goal is actually be a more accurate representation, somebody who's had flaws, who's made mistakes, who's contributed to where we are now and is now trying to make a change and make suggestions, recommendations, and trying to be the change as imperfectly as possible that I think is necessary for us to move in a better direction. I think there's a place for women's voices. I think there's a place for men's voices. And I do believe that if we get back to that, we won't nearly be as interested in what's going on in pop culture or social media or what other trends are happening. If we're good, if men and women are black men and black women are good, I feel like so much can change overnight in our culture and society. So my podcast, as you see, is Ask a Brother Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. We will be probably creating some more pages if we can keep up with it. And my hope and goal right now is that we get to a shared place of responsibility and hold ourselves to better individual standards, and we'll see the implications of it later on as this generation continues.
Very good. I'm going to leave it off there. Thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight. Really, really appreciate it. I would definitely want to have you back. I'm hoping you much more success. Thank you. Thank you so much for what you're doing and what you're going to do. I know you're going to do big things. And as we're going to sign you off here with Godson in reference to the Godfather. I heard that, brother. I tried
it. You know what it is, man? Those comparisons about Kevin Samuels, you got to realize, like, it's weird because millions of people loved him. Millions of people hated him. He was a really, really big voice. And I've been doing this for about 2 months. So it's weird to even be compared to somebody like that. But at the same time, I'm new to podcasting. I'm not new to therapy. So there's also this recognition of, like, I'm bringing a decade worth of what I know into this space. It's just the public space is the thing I don't really do on a podcasting level, but I've been doing this for a long time. So I'm grateful for the comparisons, but you know, I'm my own man. And you know, if the Godson for now is what I want to rock with until I get to like 45, then we can be God uncle or something like that. Then we'll see about that. But it's an honor to be compared to somebody who I do believe had somewhat of a positive, quite a bit of a positive impact of waking men and women up about things we need to improve.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, brother. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it, man. You guys have a great night. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you. Much love and peace.